So we're moving into the afternoon session. First, we will have a keynote address from Sir Brian Roche, and I'll introduce him in just one moment. Just to preview what happens after that, we are having parallel sessions. So we will split into two topics. In this room, we will be having a session on where to next for local government. How should the model evolve to meet society's needs? It's been a hot topic with everything from water infrastructure to rates bills to the wider system. And then in Te Kopuroa, just here to my left, your right, we will have a session on gene technologies, new frontier for health, agriculture, and the environment. So at the end of Sir Brian's talk, we'll ask you to choose a session, and we'll do a quick transition there. Right, into this discussion, and as I've already mentioned, the public service has been in the spotlight. Minister Nicola Willis, when she was responsible for that, had set pretty ambitious cost-saving targets, well, some would say otherwise. And it's at the centre of how the country runs and therefore the topics that we discuss in every other session. Sir Brian became New Zealand's Public Service Commissioner just a few weeks ago, November 2024. He's charged with overseeing the public service's performance and delivery, meaning he is the boss of 40-odd CEOs and, depending to the numbers I read, somewhere between 50, 60, 70,000 staff. He started his career as an accountant and was a senior partner at PwC. In the 1990s, he was chief Crown negotiator for Treaty of Waitangi claims, was very involved in the Mataaho claim in the South Island in particular. He has served as CEO of New Zealand Post Group, as well as chair of Waikato City Rail Link, the COVID-19 Continuous Improvement Group. And last year, in a very different capacity, he was here talking with us in his capacity chairing the Cyclone Gabrielle recovery. He also, critically, and as a highlight for me, chaired the Hurricanes rugby franchise and led and managed New Zealand's bid to host the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Scott Morrison, welcome back. So it's very good to have you here, Sir Brian. We're looking forward to hearing from you as you give your first impressions in the new role. Sir Brian will speak a little bit and then we will open up for Q&A, so please, if you've got questions, put them through on the Slido app, and look forward to a great discussion. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the public services role in the economy and what we're going to do to navigate our way through the difficult times. I'd like to acknowledge the former Governor-General and Chancellor of the University, Sir Annan, and Vice-Chancellor Neil Quigley. I'd also like to acknowledge all the other current, former, past, whatever, politicians and local dignitaries. There are too many to mention by name. And also just to acknowledge and thank Matt. So, as Matt said, I've been in the role now for 14 weeks, but who's counting? That's about 100 days, so I'm at that magic point. I've come to the role at a time of huge challenge, constrained times, if you like, but this also brings the opportunity, especially if we can get some unconstrained thinking, and I'll get to that in a minute. But just to manage the expectations, I don't have a shrink-wrapped answer or Gantt chart at this point about what we're going to do, but I've got a clear view about what we must address. Also, everything I'm about to say is completely challengeable, and I'm quite relaxed about that. And for the avoidance of doubt, I am not, as some have suggested, the Elon Musk equivalent in the New Zealand system. So, just some context. So when we talk about the public sector, this is what we really do mean, is we have got approximately 63,537 public servants, which is an increase of 30% over the last 6 years. This is much talked about. Where do they all exist? Only a small proportion, 44%, are actually in Wellington. The rest are reasonably sort of distributed around with quite some concentration in Auckland. The overall workforce costs for the core public service have grown over the last 6 years to about $6.1 billion per annum. So they represent a significant part of the New Zealand economy, and it's important that we understand it. So this is the public sector, the diagram. It'll give you a sense of where things are, and to say it's complex is an understatement. There are 46 chief executives in the core public service. That doesn't include the wider public sector, such as defence, personnel, police, teachers, public healthcare workers. All 46 chief executives are employed by me and report to me. So, when I was appointed to the job, the overriding brief I was given, and it's pretty simple, is can you go and improve the performance of the system? So, like all newcomers, I've started doing some diagnostics. I've talked to a whole lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people in the system, outside the system, in Wellington, outside Wellington. And so that's what I'm going to share with you, those observations. But at the outset, I just want to state, I actually have a deep respect for the role of the public service and the work public servants do, often without any thanks. In the short term I have been in the job, I continue to be impressed by the quality, the commitment, and the effort across the public service. My reflections that as a real public servant now is you get this feeling of being squeezed like a sandwich from all sides. The historic mythology of gliding on is a mythology. People work hard and they're doing their best. But the sector is under pressure and it needs to continue to perform and deliver for New Zealanders every day. And as we speak here, there will be people, public servants, doing things to make New Zealand and the economy better. But I'm also struck by the fact that a lot of things happen despite the system, not because people are enabled by it. There are multiple workarounds to get things done. We have a range of sprint teams, task force type interventions to speed up and work around the system. That is telling in itself. It's fair to say the observations I'm going to share with you represent challenges for all organisations across the world. The New Zealand Public Service is not unique in an organisational sense. At its core, we are a service business. And as the literature says, service businesses at their heart are responsive and adaptable to their environment and their customers. I would suggest that we have lost our way on that just a little bit. So here are my thoughts and observations as discussed with the chief executives. Somewhat encouragingly, they are acknowledged and supported by the group and by many public service. So that's a great start. Firstly, we are operating with an outdated model, no surprise there. We need to simplify things and not accept that this is the way the system is. Accepting the suboptimal is disempowering and it's conducive to poor talent management and or growing and developing people. Being passive is a learned behaviour and we need to be re-energised within the public sector. The system has served us well and it has to be acknowledged that it's a huge credit to those in the system that they actually make it work. But it's not fit for purpose in the context of a rapidly changing operating environment, in terms of the fiscal position we face, the economic growth focus we must adopt, and the increasing need to improve the quality and timeliness of decision making. We have a concept of the whole of government, and we now, as a result, have very hardwired, elaborate systems and processes to ensure that a whole of government or system perspective is brought to bear. That is good, but I would suggest it's at enormous cost in terms of time and in terms of dollars. It's generated a lot of internally focused work and multiple meetings, the value of which is questionable and often very frustrating to those who are trying to make change and lead initiatives. Whether we like it or not, the guise of collaboration has driven us towards a consensus-based model where we're essentially held ransom by the slowest participant or the poorest performer, and that has to be addressed. The balance between accountability and outcomes for individual agencies versus the outcomes for the system as a whole is a point of ongoing tension and discovery. Matrix management is unavoidable, and we need to get better at it. There is a sense of consultation within the public sector becoming a mechanism to avoid decision making. The system is inherently inefficient. The public service has become weighted down, in my view, by risk considerations and gets lost in processes that don't add value. Risk has become the overly dominant feature of discussion. If we concentrated on creating value as much as we manage risk, what would that look like? What impact would it have on our productivity? Risk is an unavoidable fact of life. The issue is one of management and mitigation, not elimination. As we well know, the risk of doing nothing is often greater than the risk of action, so we need to go from avoiding risk to proactively managing it. As a result of the overweighting on risk, we have too many layers of management and meetings that can stifle and even kill action and progress. The scale of our entities. The size and scale matter. Our current model, as suggested by the 46 CEs, we have a number of agencies that are subscale and unable to capture the economic efficiencies of others, nor do they have the depth to provide resilience over time. We need to find a way around being able to create scale, remove the inefficiencies of subscale and duplication without stifling the benefits of individual focus around specific constituencies or issues. The reality is that we have a number of entities which are subscale, which involves a lot of fixed cost and a lot of duplication. The question remains about what the optimal size of a public service entity is. If we address the inefficiencies, what will we be stripping out? This is the conversation I'm having with the chief executives. There's trade-offs between technology and people, but that optimal resourcing model has got to be worked through. We can't continually ask people to run faster. We actually need to change the way we do things. Decision-making and responsiveness is something of a mystery in the public sector at times. So we need to improve our decision-making. I think there is a global trend of decentralisation and empowering communities and others to have more say and control over decisions and delivery. Put another way, we need more community and a little less Wellington, but not at the expense of accountability and/or integrity. We already have evidence that it's already in evidence in our operating environment, so it's not new, but we need to change and the pace and the scale of that devolution. We need to increasingly make it the norm and the way we do business. Our daily lives are increasingly dependent on data and technology, as we found out this morning. Business and our operating models are the same. The rate of change will accelerate, and our operating model needs to reflect that. Data and information will be the asset and currency of our systems. It's got to be used to support decision-making and will impact on how third parties and users of our systems engage with us. I'll come back to the issue of data and AI later. But we have to, address this. The ability to improve the quality and timeliness of decision-making is of huge value to the public sector, and I would suggest the wider economy. We need to be more responsive as a system. At our core, as I've said, we are businesses delivering services to others. The public service needs to continue to focus more on citizens and less on the institutions. It sounds obvious, but we need to increasingly adopt an external market focus that puts the citizens we serve at the centre. It can be done. New South Wales Public Service has configured its operating model with a heavy focus, so we have examples to follow. All systems and businesses run to some degree of history and learned behaviour. What we do today, we did yesterday, last month, and last year. This creates an easier and less challenging operating model, but I would suggest it also stifles innovation and disruptive thinking. We need a greater sense of curiosity within the public sector about why things are done the way they are and where could they be better. The ability and willingness to disrupt yourself is a strength. We need to create a sense of urgency, a wartime focus every day, as it were, and leave the hardwired architecture behind. It's really interesting, but the public service is often at its best in times of crises. In those situations, the public service steps outside the traditional or orthodox way of operating. I'd like to take the best of what we learn from those situations and reverse engineer it into our orthodox or peacetime way of operating. I think that would be more rewarding for everybody, including the participants. As a result of where we are, I think there is too much focus on management in the public service and not enough focus on leadership. They are very different concepts. What does leadership look like in a modern public management system? And what are the attributes of leadership that we need to have in a rapidly changing environment? We have fallen behind in that regard. And we need to create a culture and ways of working that empower frontline workers to work in communities, delivering services that are responsive to local need. And that will require an adjustment in our risk appetite and operating models. This goes to the heart of how we do business and the ability to stand in the shoes of those we serve. Empathy and respect and understanding are key. We need to reorientate the public service, and I'm feeling actually both intimidated and exhilarated by that challenge. And when I think about this, I'm looking at actually not rebooting from scratch. I see it more as adjusting our current models, aligning them and streamlining them. As I've said previously, our existing model has served us well, but it's now outdated and it's not fit for purpose. If we started today, we would not design a system as it's currently operated, and we would not have 46 entities. We need to modify it. Ultimately, where we need to be is totally different to where we are now. The market's changing and the machine isn't responding. It's not a criticism of anyone, by the way. It's just the reality of our operating environment. The public service must set the highest standards. That means being competent at what we do, upholding political neutrality, free and frank advice, being efficient with taxpayers' money, corruption-free, and delivering outcomes for the people we serve. We also have an important stewardship role and responsibility to uphold, and that includes maintaining talent and capability across the public service for the future, all with the objective of retaining the trust and confidence of the public, ministers, and successive governments. So some ideas. We've got 3 things we're focused on immediately, all of which will actually secure change. Social investment, use of data and AI, and supporting economic growth. We need to gear the public service more towards results and outcomes. We have to get away from this notion that a reset is about one person, such as myself, coming in and changing a few things, and then we go back to sleep. Change and innovation are forever. This is very much at the heart of private sector service businesses, so why would it be different for the public sector? We need to be repositioning and reinventing all of the time. We need pragmatic, data-driven policy solutions in real time. I believe it's a way of thinking, it's an attitude, but it's the essence of leadership in what I believe to be a contemporary environment. So there are some areas. First one, social investment. A lot of thinking has been done on this, and social investment model designed to deliver better outcomes is currently under development. It's a model that puts people and outcomes first, and it's a model that will deliver for the community in the community. It won't be done necessarily out of Wellington. We need to change the way services are delivered for people with high and complex needs that cut across our agency silos. The idea is that for those people, those closest in the community, them are most likely to be successful in finding the solutions. And to be effective in dealing with cross-cutting problems, providers need flexibility to bring solutions that put the person or family in the centre of the service delivery. This may not sound revolutionary to you, but it is to many. I know there are different schools of thought about social investment and outcomes-based contracts. My question to those skeptics is the current system working? Are they achieving the outcomes we want and this country needs? I would suggest they aren't. Our core focus must be on the citizens, not on the institutions. So that's what we're going to be doing. We also want to empower the communities and the public servants to be able to be decision makers and not micromanage them. If it works, we'll take a similar approach to other sectors. It's worth trying, and we shouldn't be afraid of failing, and I'm assured that I have the political cover to allow for some failures, as long as they're not too big. The use of data and AI. There is no doubt AI is going to transform the way public services are delivered in New Zealand. We have no choice but to embrace it, and as we did the internet and smartphones, but we're going to have to be smart. It will allow the public service and government to work more effectively and make better decisions. But our unwavering purpose must be the use of technology in a way that benefits and helps citizens. It's already happening within the public sector. There are really good examples of it being used in New Zealand Customs. The challenge is, how do we make it the norm and not the exception? Honourable Judith Collins, the Minister for the Public Service, said to Public Service Chief Executives on Tuesday that we are on the cusp of a digital revolution that has the power to transform the way government serves New Zealand. I believe and support that. She talked about the possibility of a centralised AI-powered platform that enables real-time sharing of insights and collaboration between agencies like health, education and housing. Our ability to do that is constrained, but the value, if we were able to do it, is very significant. But once again, we can't lose sight of the objective, and that is that people and businesses get the services and information they need, whatever the time and wherever the place. We will have to think through the privacy challenges. We mentioned facial recognition this morning. You know, we take that seriously. It's a non-negotiable. But the challenges we're facing in the public service are, in my view, not unique. The disruptive potential of AI is one of global trends every country, every government, every business is grappling with, and we have the ability to learn from others. If we get it right, data and AI won't just help us develop world-class public service, it will create new jobs and stimulate the economy. Economic growth. Government spending is a big part of the New Zealand economy. Public service is a very big part of the economy. Its performance is critical to the New Zealand economy, and we're not actually performing to the levels that we need to. We have to have an important role in economic growth. The public sector is not separate and distinct from the rest of the country, and I do get a sense that there is quite a divide between the private and productive sector at this point. I don't think that's good for a small economy like ours. So I want the public service to have a reputation as a place to do business. That doesn't mean we commercialise everything or compromise the delivery of social services. But efficiency and value for money is obviously a non-negotiable. We are under fiscal pressure and we have to discharge our responsibilities to use taxpayer money very wisely. The challenge is, how do you do that when the public service is often the only sole provider of a service? So I'm really interested in how we proxy some market disciplines and demonstrate to ourselves value for money. The public service needs to see itself as an enabler of productivity and growth, and we have to get better at working with business. Both public and private sectors need to lift their game in terms of collaboration. How we work as public servants can and will make a difference. We need to be looking at how we streamline processes, including our regulatory frameworks. We may even learn about how to communicate more clearly. That in itself would be helpful. I believe business-friendly practices and strong relationships with the private sector can spur innovation in the public sector and improve the way we do our business. The public service does have an important job in supporting the government to foster entrepreneurship and attract investments. These things ultimately help create jobs and drive economic growth. We are in a rapidly changing world. AI is going to move things faster, even more quickly than we've experienced in recent times. And the public service has to gear up and adapt just as fast. And I'm confident we will. My immediate focus is prioritising efficiency and performance of the existing model. That needs to be done, and it needs to be stabilised as soon as possible so that we can move to operating in a bigger, more technologically driven and customer-centric orientated world. I want to acknowledge that I've talked about my observations and then some of the ideas. I haven't quite got the middleware yet, but that will come. To be clear, the New Zealand Public Service does perform. It does deliver. Public servants get out of bed every day and make a difference to people's lives. But like all businesses, we can always do better. And it's incumbent on all of the public service to try and do better. My job over the next short while is to position the public service so that it is as fit for purpose to face the challenges and priorities that come our way. Unconstrained thinking for constrained times couldn't be a more relevant theme. We know the old ways of working in the public service won't work for the future. I want to see a public service that embraces innovation and thinks beyond what is conventional today. A public service that encourages original ideas and creative solutions while maintaining the non-negotiable values of integrity, ethics, and trust. I take particular confidence in our ability to do that. Many of the issues I've highlighted this afternoon are not unique. They are experienced by other public administrations worldwide, plus I think within the broader private sector. That gives us a huge opportunity. There is no public servant who does not want to deliver value. We just have to define what this means and make sure the taxpayer and the citizen are in the heart of what we do. I can't predict the future. No one can. But what I am certain of is that public servants will rise to whatever challenge comes our way with courage, with innovation, and the clear objective of serving the citizens of New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Brian. You have quite a brief in front of you, 100 days in. There are several themes that you've touched on there that I've got questions on, and I've already seen a lot of questions come in on the app, so please send more if you'd like. First, you talked a lot about some of the challenges we have. It might be over-consultation, it might be the meetings that stop rather than power, a focus on risk rather than value at times. You've spoken to, if not all, most of the 46. You've spoken to many others. You've also spoken to ministers, and I've seen you in media talking about sometimes a disconnect between what ministers and their read of the public want and what agencies might be doing. What leads to that? I mean, you've talked to learned behaviour in there, but what is in the system? Because no public servant doesn't want to create value. You've just said that. So why is that evolved?
That should be the subject of a PhD.
We get AI to write it.
Yeah, but it's sort of a mystery to me. It's because, we have this situation where we have really good people wanting to do really good things, but the gears just don't feel that smooth. And I think it just becomes a pattern of what's acceptable. And that's one of the points I make is, we want to have agencies where curiosity is seen as an asset, where people ask questions of themselves. And I get a sense that we often are afraid to ask the question because we won't like the answer, because it will impose an obligation on you as the leader to do something. I think that's a really good thing, that's all. But all of the chief executives, everyone I talk to when I say, why have we just learned to accept suboptimal? People sort of look at the floor and feel a bit uncomfortable. They're trained that way, that's the way it is, that's what they expect. And I think, as I've said, service businesses, and I know we're a public service, but service is a really important concept, are always finding new ways of how to do things. Whereas we have hardwired a lot, and I get a sense that something once went wrong, and so we build quite an elaborate set of architecture around something, and we forget to take it down. I think private sector's a bit guilty of this as well, by the way. So everything is a result of an experience. And I don't know, sometimes I use an analogy, like, for those people who have to use vacuum cleaners like myself, every now and again, vacuum cleaners need to have their dust bag cleared because they become more effective. That's what I think at times about the public sector. Let's just empty the dust bag. Get rid of all the stuff and sort of reset. And that's what we need to do. I haven't talked about, cost cutting, nothing like that. Let's just get this model working and optimised.
Thank you. So I know you joked at the start that you're not New Zealand's Elon Musk. You're not about to launch a meme stock with your initials. So there is a very popular question on here, though, that picks up on something you've just said, which is, do you think wasteful spending is an issue in the public service, and what is driving that? Is it institutions or individuals not working to capacity, if it is there? And also, you could look at the US as an experiment of, can you radically cut to improve efficiency? Do you think we have examples where that could work in New Zealand?
Is there wasteful expenditure? I don't think it's at any substantive scale. And I'm implicitly acknowledging there must be some ways. You can't spend that amount of money, and a fraction of it, there's probably true of every business. Is every dollar that you spend absolutely necessary? Probably not. The thing that drives me on the money is not the issue of waste, but how do you demonstrate value, and how do you demonstrate that you are the best at providing that? As I said, I know this sounds incredibly theoretical, but we don't have any market pressures. And I had the opportunity of meeting yesterday with the Auditor General, and he made a really interesting observation, is one of the measures of success in the public sector is just to stay within your budget. That's not necessarily the most successful measure of success. And it's got me thinking, it goes back to why are you the best at doing what you are doing? And what is your core business? Because one of the things, and this may touch on the issue of waste, is, and I'm encouraging the chief executives, just go think, what is your core business that are the non-negotiable bit that you must do under statute? And then what is the other stuff you're doing, and why are you doing that? What would that mean? So that would inevitably result in some things being stopped. I'm really confident. But I think those things will be byproduct of what I'm trying to drive. They're not the driver of it.
I'll go to another question from the audience and add a little flavour to it as well. So there's a question here about how do you move from risk aversion to value creation as your priority. And you and I have discussed in the past, I'm curious about things like a no surprises policy. Public servants are there to provide free and frank advice once they're asked to consider whether something might be considered a political surprise. That puts a little person on your shoulder getting you to think about politics when you're supposed to not think about politics. Are there elements within our system, you might disagree with that, are there elements within our system that you think lead towards risk aversion? And do you have, or what levers are you thinking of pulling to get to a value focus?
Yeah, look, there's no question that the history of making mistakes in the public service has not been that rewarding for the individuals. They get ridiculed publicly, and they're never able to talk back to the public about why they did something. I don't think people are stupid. Nobody wants to make mistakes, right? So I think people have become risk adverse because a measure of success is to be below the radar and actually not necessarily at the front. That's not a bad thing, by the way, but it's when the risk processes so dumb you down that you become, robotic. There's nothing, I think part of business, part of life and that is putting your personality into the task that you are doing. It's a really important thing to me as an individual. So, yeah, I think there's politicians often talk a slightly bigger game in the cover they'll give you than what actually transpires when the mistake happens.
Impossible to imagine.
I can't think of an example, but there are people in the room who are public servants who know exactly. So, yeah, to me, the Big Bang approach is not the right approach in my view to the public service. It's not in crisis. It just needs to have the dust bag emptied and reorientated and focus on value and productivity and measures, because for every dollar we receive, there's a dollar not going somewhere else. It's really basic economics. And for those of you, in one of my previous lives, I sold time. I'm really conscious about what I do with my time. It's a measure of productivity, because have I spent my time wisely and have I done anything that created value for somebody? And, without being ageist, I'm too old to change that view. But I think there's something in that view that should be embodied in service businesses, because that's what service businesses do. They deliver service and create value for the people you serve.
I'm going to stay on people and culture and maybe some of that mindset piece. So you've got a group of very senior leaders. Some of us here will know some public sector CEOs, senior public servants. These are large, complex organisations in their own right. What you touched lightly in your remarks on a difference between management and leadership. You said you're looking for leadership, so I'm interested in what that distinction is for you. But also, what are you looking for? One of your core responsibilities, like that of any board, is choosing your leaders, hiring the right person, selecting the right person. There have been changes over time in the public service between a focus on deep expertise, the classic person who came up through the ranks, and then those that have been successful in one agency that moved to another. I'm interested if you've got a view on those, but mostly, what are you looking for in the leaders of the public service?
To me, leadership is very much around the culture and all of those, what people would say is soft skills. But Matt, your point's right. These are big, complex businesses, and we look at ourselves as being the public sector, and, we're different to the private sector. My hypothesis is actually organisational design, processes, culture, all those things, I don't think there's a difference between the sectors. One makes a profit, one doesn't. But, you think about the engagement with people, all that. So I want leaders who actually are able to sort of not just control everything and do all the housekeeping, that stuff's all a given, but how do you create an environment where you're getting the best out of people? How do you get it where they feel empowered to challenge you and all of those annoying things when you're the leader, that people do? But that energy, that curiosity, I don't feel that. And I think that's important. I think that's important because ultimately I want public servants to feel really good about themselves and feel valued. And I want the public sector to be a place where people want to work because they can make a difference. And so for me, the leader, I deeply respect technical skill given my lack of it in a way. But if you follow the technical line, it means only a pilot could be the CEO of Air New Zealand. That's not correct. So why confuse things? I suppose I'm saying I want specialist generalists who can read situations and read people and can pull together a whole lot of complicated stuff and simplify it. The job of the leaders in the public sector is to simplify and not complicate. And I think from time to time, we've lost our way on that. Once again, I don't think that's just a public sector issue. I think that's... Fonterra will be different, I know.
Yeah, completely. I don't have a view for the next 3 weeks. I'm going to go from that into resources, and it touches on some questions here and more generally. Reduction in scale, and particularly in employee numbers across headcount, across public services, of course, been all over the media. There are a couple of flow-on implications for that, but you're also facing into enormous demands across health, law and order, education, infrastructure, and you're wanting to move into a data-driven world. You know, first thing you might want to do in data is let's get in some expertise and consultants who know what they do, or hire some more data analysts. How do you square the circle on the amount of resources you have or don't have? This is the constrained times piece, and the task in front of you. Do you think you can? You've said there's not a heck of a lot of material waste. How do you square that circle?
Yeah, I wouldn't be sitting here. You could ask Ian Rennie that tomorrow.
I will.
Yeah, look, the way I think about it, and it was something Nicola Willis talked about this morning, we need to move from just thinking about cost to where value is, and this is a real challenge for some in the Treasury whose spreadsheets don't quite allow this to happen. I think if we really want to sort of change the way we do business, there will be a requirement to invest in infrastructure, which I would describe as what, decision support tools are needed. Because at the core of our business, we do policy and all this stuff. So I haven't quite got to the Minister of Finance yet on this, but I don't think you can sweat the existing assets for too much longer. Technology is a given. Because we're slow investors, we may have the ability to skip a couple of generations and actually go to the current one. And, what happened in New Zealand in the 1990s with telecom when Peter Troughton took over. So, yeah, I haven't got a budget bid in yet, and that's why I want to optimise. Until we can prove that we have optimised the current system and that we are doing equivalent productivity and value and all those things, it's very hard to go and ask for more money. It's just not right.
All right, a last question, because then we're going to have a bit of a session transition as we split in a moment. You've come into the role, you've got this enormous brief in front of you. If we were to invite you back in to talk at the forum next year, and I can see how excited you are about it, what do you want to look back on, say, from next February?
The one thing I'd really want to look back on is that the system had embraced the opportunity for change and really executed. Because I think I'm really conscious that we can redefine the problem and avoid doing something. And I think it's the doing that makes the difference, not necessarily the thinking. So, yeah, the one thing I would want is that we have demonstrated that we've made change, that we've empowered people to feel like they're in control of their workplace and that they can do stuff without having to refer through 2 or 3 layers of people. So mine would be a freedom thing, that people just feel better and more empowered to do what they need to do. That would be good.
Brilliant. All right. Before we move on to our next session, I just want to say thank you, Sir Brian. Great to have you back at the forum.
That's right.
Enjoyed that, and I suspect you'll have some people bending your ear over a coffee very shortly. So thank you.
Thanks. Good done.
That's great.
Oh, that was good.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right. So we're going to shift gears and seats in just one moment. Our next session, so we're just on time. Our next session, as I said, is split. In this room, we're going to have the local government panel. So what next for local government? How should the model evolve to meet society's needs? In Te Kopuroa, just through the doors to your right, my left, we're going to have the session on gene technologies, the new frontier for health, agriculture, and the environment. If you can decide which one you want to go to, for those on the live stream, There are live streams for both sessions. You can look at both. If you're on the app, you can choose which session you want to be asking questions on. So if Nanaia Mahuta starts getting the questions on gene technology, we'll know that we're mixed up. But please choose those. We'll take a couple of minutes for the transition, and then we'll get into our next panels. We'll break after those at 2:40 for another brief coffee. Thank you.